Moving on to one other feature in InDesign, I'm going to go to layers and actually turn this layer off and turn on my single box layer here. So all I have is a single box. And again, we'll put a color on this so that you can see it a little bit better. Okay, so this has a yellow fill with a very small 1-point black stroke. I'm seeing red because that's the color of my selection indicator for this specific layer. So the live distribute is basically a technique that proportionally resizes the spaces between objects, and only the space between the frames will change. So the frames actually won't change, only the spaces. Now what I can do here is either select this and go back under my edit and do a step and repeat this multiple times, putting spaces in between so that I have a nicely spaced grid, so to speak, of my containers. Now, because this container I believe is around 2 inches, you can see that I'm not really getting anywhere with it too. I have to go above it because it's offsetting it from the point. If I go 3, it might give me an error that says it's going to run off of my paste board. So let's do 3 over here. All right, so you can see that it's distributing. So I could mess around with this if I wanted to. Now instead, I'm going to use a different method. Actually, I'm going to create a box with my tool. Click and drag. If I hold down Shift, it's going to make a perfect square. And now the quick keys of just using my arrow keys. So I still have Shift held down, and I'm using my up and right arrow key, and it's allowing me then to make multiples. I'm still holding Shift because I'm constraining it to boxes, and I'm still holding my mouse. Now if I let up, I get a grid of multiple objects. So this is a very fast way for creating multiple containers, whether it be for text or for pictures, or just for the graphical non-assigned type frames. So now this live distribute technique happens when I select multiple objects. So if I happen to deselect, I need to select everything here. And then I start dragging the bounding box. When I have multiple items selected, I get a bounding box around it. So if I start dragging here and then hold my space bar, you don't really see anything that's happening, but if I let up, what you'll find is that it's increasing the spacing, or it's sort of distributing them live according to the size that I'm dragging my bounding box. So the spaces between the objects are being resized, but my objects themselves are not. Okay? So that alignment of the objects does depend on, where and in what direction I drag. So that's kind of a nice thing. So if I continue with this and use my space bar here, we'll be able to distribute this equally to my margins of my page. Now, say my gaps are a little bit large here. We have a gap tool. The gap tool is positioned very near the top of the toolbar, and if I click on that, I'm moving my cursor, just kind of hover over some of this area here. You can see that I'm getting a darkened, plus I get an interesting little icon out there. So this affects the width of the frames or the gaps. So depending on modifier keys, it's a very quick way that I can adjust the size of the gaps between multiple objects. So if I just click right here, say, and drag, you can see that I'm dragging my gap, and what's happening is my frames or my containers are resizing accordingly. This is just dragging the tool without holding anything else, no other keys except for my mouse key. Now if I do Shift, it only affects the gap between the 2 items that are nearest to the cursor. So I can alter this a little bit, make some interesting designs. If I hold the Alt key, it actually moves the item with the gap instead of resizing. So the whole thing in the area that I click is being relocated and moved. If I hold Control, I'm able to increase the width and height of the gap, and then both objects here are being resized. So gap tool alone sort of just moves the gap and things are resized. Holding down the Alt key adjusts if I want thin or thick. Okay, dragging up, dragging down, changes that gap. If I hold Shift, it just affects that one spot that I'm clicking. So interesting ways you can work off of a grid but yet alter so that you have some interesting effects. So there we have it. We have gap tool, we have live distribute, we have our align panel with things like alignment and distribute, and we have the step and repeat command.